The movie opens in the rural Norwegian town of Ada, where we see a doctor named Camilla examining an old woman in a hospital. After the checkup, she goes to the reception and talks with her two colleagues, Dr. Herman, and a nurse named Audild. It turns out that their hospital is about to shut down since it is located in a remote area, and there are barely any patients. Not long after, Camilla's cop boyfriend, Ole, comes to visit her. During their conversation, Ole receives a call from his senior, stating that an abandoned car has been found near the mountains, so he bids goodbye to Camilla. As soon as Ole reaches the location, he finds the car, which is coated in snow, and realizes it has been abandoned for 2 to 3 days. He asks his team if anyone has reported a missing person, but his colleagues say no. So, he gets in the car and decides to drive to the station. But minutes later, Ole almost gets into an accident when an odd woman shows up in the middle of the road with a pickaxe. The woman immediately passes out due to exhaustion and cold. He then puts her in his car, and calls Camilla to tell her about the situation. Ole mentions that she has blood all over her, but the woman insists that it's not her blood. Soon, after the treatment, the cops also arrive and ask her how she ended up in this situation. The woman claims that her name is Janik, and that she and her friends went to the mountains for snowboarding. When one of her friend's legs was hurt, they entered an abandoned hotel to rest. There, a mysterious mountain man killed all of her friends, but she somehow managed to kill him. Janik discloses the location of all the bodies, and when asked why she was carrying the pickaxe, she explains that she feared the mountain man would return. Afterward, the chief officer, Einar, speaks with Dr. Herman and asks if the woman's mental condition is stable. The cops then decide to go to the location given by her, but they leave behind an officer named Sverre at the hospital. Afterwards, the cops arrive at the said location amidst the pouring snow, and witness the frightening sight. They find several dead bodies, including the one of the psycho mountain man. Back at the hospital, a little boy patient named Daniel visits Janik's room. He then invites her to play a video game, but she claims to be tired right now. Meanwhile, the cops bring out the dead bodies and load them into their vans. Einar decides that he and Ole will take the bodies to the hospital for further examination, while the other two cops are instructed to seal the area, and then inspect the hotel. In the next scene, the bodies are brought to the same hospital. The doctors are prepared for forensic examinations, and their pictures are taken. During this time, Einar checks the killer's body closely, and discovers a birthmark around his eyes. This reminds him of something, so he quickly heads to the station. Upon arriving, he brings out some old unsolved case files, and reads about a boy who went missing in these mountains 30 years ago. The shocking fact is that he had the same birthmark around his eyes as the mountain man. At the morgue, Audild is undressing the corpses, and packing their belongings into bags. On the other hand, Camilla reveals to Janik that her friends' bodies have been discovered and brought here, and Camilla asks if she would like to see the bodies. After a while, the two ladies arrive at the morgue. Janik becomes very emotional and breaks into tears upon seeing the bodies of her friends. However, when she sees the killer's body, she is infuriated, but before the situation can get out of hand, Camilla calms her down. Elsewhere, the other two cops, Kim and Johan, reach the hotel to investigate the murder site, but they find nothing there except some traces of blood. Just then, Einar tells them to return to the crevasse, as he thinks there may be something else there. Currently, he is reviewing archived news articles about the unresolved disappearances of many hikers in this area. Soon, the cops arrive at the crevasse, and Kim stays on top, while Johan goes down. After searching for a while, he is horrified to discover several dead bodies that appear to have been there for a long time. Back at the morgue, as Audild is trying to undress the mountain man, he suddenly starts moving. Turns out he's not dead after all. Panicked, the nurse urgently calls for the doctors. Although the man is a cold-hearted killer, they still decide to resuscitate him as it is their duty. Soon, Janik hears the commotion and comes out to see what's happening. Upon realizing that the doctors are trying to save the killer, she becomes enraged. She starts acting violently, and even punches Sverre in the face. But the cop eventually restrains her hands, and she is taken back to her room. Following the doctor's emergency procedure, the mountain man's heartbeat returns to normal. Sverre handcuffs him to the bed and sits down to watch over him. After the doctors leave, Audhild stays with Sverre and begins to treat his injuries. They exchange compliments and flirt with each other. Audhild then mentions that her shift is over and that she'll head home now. But as she walks away, unfortunately, before the cop can figure anything out, the killer grabs a surgical instrument and slices his throat in a single stroke. Meanwhile, Audhild goes to take a shower, completely unaware of the impending danger. Once she's done, she dries her hair and gets dressed. She then walks into the corridor, only to find the place completely dark. Slightly scared, Audhild reaches for a switch and turns on the light. But this is when the killer shows up and strikes her with an extinguisher. Sometime later, she regains consciousness and finds herself inside the shower. As soon as she opens her eyes, she sees the mountain man in front of her, and he bludgeons her with the same extinguisher, leading to her demise. Elsewhere, Dr. Herman and Camilla are surprised when the lights go out and the entire hospital becomes dark. Dr. Herman then goes to the generator room, while Camilla decides to check on the patients. Meanwhile, Einar investigates the mountain man's background and watches a recorded interview with the boy's parents. They describe how he went out to play as usual and then never came back. In the other article, there are a lot of horrible incidents in the abandoned hotels area, which made tourists flee and push the hotel to the brink of bankruptcy. After delving further, Einar finds an article about a man surviving a deliberately set fire at that hotel. The man was a district doctor named Haldor, so Einar contacts him and they agree to meet at a local cafe. Back at the hospital, Janek suddenly awakens, and tries to get up, but realizes that she has been restrained because of her earlier brawl. Meanwhile, Camilla is walking through the dark hallway when she notices Audhild's clothes on the floor. She calls out to her and walks toward the bathroom, where she slips on something and falls. When the lights turn on, she notices Audhild's mutilated body in front of her, causing her to panic. On the other hand, Herman is working on fixing the generator when he senses someone's presence in the room. He then turns around to find the same mountain man in front of him. Terrified, Herman tries to run away from there, but he stumbles on the stairs. The killer brutally breaks his neck, killing him on the spot. Meanwhile, a panicked Camilla goes to the reception to make a call, but finds that the phone isn't working. She then realizes that the killer is approaching, and quickly hides behind the reception desk. The killer moves around the area and grabs a murder tool. Fortunately, he doesn't notice her presence and walks away. Elsewhere, Einar meets with the former district doctor Haldor, and Haldor starts sharing the backstory of the mountain man's family. He reveals that various search parties have been assigned to discover the family throughout the years, but to no avail. He also suggests that the parents may have been murdered, and then says that the kid was never really normal. When he was born, he was stillborn and declared officially dead. But 4 hours later, his heart miraculously started beating. In the hospital, Janek continues her attempts to break free, right when the little boy Daniel enters the room, and she asks for his help to release her. The boy checks the cabinet, grabs a pair of scissors, and cuts her restraints. Janek then asks him to keep quiet, as she fears something has gone wrong. After a while, the two arrive at the room where the mountain man was kept earlier, but they only find an empty bed with handcuffs left behind. Just then, Janek notices him walking down the hallway, forcing her to retreat. After the killer is gone, she hides Daniel in a closet, and instructs him not to come out until she returns. In the next scene, Janek goes to the medical lab, where she initially breaks down in tears. She then fills a syringe with a deadly sedative, aiming to use it against the killer. At the same time, Camilla finds her phone and immediately calls Ole. He unfortunately doesn't answer, so she leaves him a voice message, explaining the situation. She then heads towards the medical lab to hide, but Janek attacks her with a syringe, thinking she is the killer. But fortunately, she hasn't injected the deadly sedative. The two then devise a strategy on how to deal with the killer, and decide that their priority is to save the two patients, Daniel and an old lady. But as they leave the room, Camilla insists she won't leave without Herman, and rushes to find him. Meanwhile, Daniel is busy playing a game when he's startled by the sound of falling objects. Later, Janek comes looking for him, but discovers that the closet is empty. On the other hand, when Camilla reaches the morgue room, she hears footsteps approaching. She hides under a trolley table used for carrying corpses, while the mountain man retrieves his belongings, including his original pickaxe. Camilla hangs under the bed, but eventually gets tired and falls. This exposes her location, but Janek arrives in the nick of time and shoves a trolley table into the killer. The girls rush out of the room and lock the metal door. Daniel also shows up and the three quickly exit the hospital. Luckily, the cops have just arrived, and Janek informs them that the killer has been confined in the morgue. But she doesn't want to take any more chances. She decides to finish off the mountain man herself, but Einar stops her, claiming that they will handle the matter themselves. The police place her in the locked police vehicle to ensure she stays put. After this, the cops get ready to storm the hospital, including Ole. Camilla urges him not to go, but he insists that he'll be fine. Soon, Daniel's mother arrives to pick him up, and he bids farewell to the ladies. Einar, accompanied by Kim and Ole, then enters the hospital armed with guns, while Johan stays in the car with the girls. Shortly after, the cops reach the morgue room, but shockingly discover no one inside. This makes them realize that the mountain man is once again on the loose. As they are making their way out, they find Sverre's dead body in the corridor. Seeing this, Kim becomes very emotional, and despite Einar's refusal, he ends up approaching the dead body. But as soon as he does this, he gets stuck in a wire trap. The mountain man pulls him into a room, and then Einar discovers Kim already dead inside. The killer also advances toward Ole, and viciously attacks him. Einar follows them into a room, but he is also attacked there. Outside, Johan tries to contact his team but receives no response. This makes Janek realize that the mountain man has killed all the cops. With no options left, Johan and the girls decide to go inside, but before they can even exit the car, the mountain man appears and kills Johan with a single strike. The killer starts piercing holes in the car with a metal rod, while Janek urges Camilla to grab the cop's gun, but the killer breaks the window and pulls Camilla out. Seeing this, Janek breaks the window to escape. The mountain man is about to kill Camilla when Ole shoots him from behind. He then collapses on the floor, and passes away. At this moment, Janek retrieves the gun from the car, and attempts to shoot the killer. But upon seeing Camilla in tears, she goes over to comfort her instead. Unfortunately, this turns out to be a bad decision, as when she turns back seconds later, the killer is already gone. An enraged Janek then notices his bloody footprints, and realizes that he is heading back to the hotel. Determined to end it once and for all, she grabs a shotgun, wears a police jacket, and puts on snow goggles. She gets on the snowmobile and decides to go to the hotel. Camilla urges her not to go, saying it is a suicide mission. However, Janek ignores her warning and leaves. When she gets to the hotel, she looks around, but does not see the mountain man anywhere. Janek then waits for the psychopath to arrive, but she is so tired that she eventually falls asleep. In the following scene, morning arrives, and Janek awakens from her sleep. However, she notices that the lobby door is open, with snow splatters on the floor. In a swift move, she turns around and sees him right behind her. Janek attempts to shoot him with her gun, but he effortlessly swats it away. He then begins toying with her, while Janek desperately tries to get the shotgun. Finally, the mountain man decides to finish her off. But then, someone shoots him from behind. It turns out to be Camilla, and with her shot, she has severed 2 of his fingers. She attempts to shoot him again, but he becomes enraged, and throws her out of the hotel. The mountain man then grabs her, and proceeds to gouge her eyes out. But fortunately, Janek grabs his pickaxe, and swings it toward him, piercing his torso. This causes him to collapse to the ground. Here Camilla thinks that he is finally dead, however, Janek isn't going to take any chances now. She grabs the shotgun and shoots him directly in the head.